we had a son at that time, a toddler, and of course I was breastfeeding him. But as he got older and we were contemplating what to feed him, we were like, I remember my husband at the time saying, if we're not going to put it in our mouths and our bodies, why would we put it in his? So I remember we made that choice. What are we going to lift and offer to our child? What are we going to put on the plate in front of him?
As a vegan, do you ever feel like you're living in a parallel universe, aware of things that many others don't even seem to notice, let alone acknowledge? I'm Chrissy Benson, host of the Vegan Posse podcast. We talk with vegans from around the globe who, like you, are living lives of integrity and compassion with an eye toward justice. Through their personal stories, you'll come to see that you're not an outlier. In fact, you're part of an entire posse of individuals who aren't just keeping the peace, they're creating it through their food choices and beyond. You won't be saddling up, but you're in for the ride of your life. Welcome to the Vegan Posse. Hey Posse, I'm Chrissy Benson, host of the Vegan Posse podcast. We've got a lot of exciting things going on here at the Vegan Posse. First, as you can see, we've started producing video episodes of the show so that you can see all of our beautiful guests with your very own eyes. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the Vegan Posse on YouTube and Spotify. Or if listening is your preference, the show will continue to be available in podcast form on all your favorite podcast platforms. Next, the Vegan Posse Self-Love series is coming soon, so stay tuned. In preparation, make sure to pick up a copy of my novel, Marrying Myself, featured in Veg News magazine as a top media pick of the year, and dubbed the anti-romance romance for its revolutionary self-love message. Visit my website, ChristineMelanieBenson.com, for all the info you need. And now for this week's episode of the Vegan Posse. It's week 2 of our Tennessee series, where we're featuring some amazing vegans in my neck of the woods here in Nashville, Tennessee. Today, you'll get to meet longtime vegan Carden, daughter of chart-topping country music star Ronnie McDowell. From the time she was really little, Cara grew up touring the country and occasionally selling merch for her dad. She went on to become a freelance journalist and travel writer, and later a homeschooling mom and founder of Nashville Waldorf Homeschoolers. Every time I talk to Cara, I'm astounded at how much cool stuff she's done, how much she knows, and how committed she is to continuing to learn, grow, and discover. So enjoy this conversation with Tennessee's very own Cara Carden. Cara, welcome to the Vegan Posse. Are you ready for the
Thank
ride
you,
of your life?
I think I am.
Okay. Well, I'm really happy you agreed to come on the show and share your story, which is just such an interesting one. You and I met through our mutual friend, Molly Eaton, whom I met when I organized a speaking event for Dr. Will Tuttle, author of the book, The World's Peace Diet. And so Molly was always telling me all about you and your really interesting vegan history and just unconventional life growing up. So I'm really excited to delve in and hear some of your stories. So you grew up in Tennessee and you had a rather unconventional childhood, touring the country with your father, who is a chart-topping musician and country music artist named Ronnie McDowell. What was that like?
It's true. It was really fun. It was a creative environment. Our home was always full of art and music and people thinking out of the box and big ideas. And I love the travel part of it. I loved seeing the country. At that time, he wasn't really going overseas as much of his own choice. He's a Vietnam veteran, and he was like, I want to stay in this country for a while. So he wasn't ready to roam. But I saw most of this country. And we had adventures. We would go find neat little restaurants, or we would take walks together during the day, and then just meet very interesting people along the way. My teachers didn't always like the long absences, I'll have to say.
Interesting.
Yeah, I always did miss the maximum number of days you could miss without being kicked out. But I kept my grades up and was a high performing student anyway. I did homework like on ships and buses and planes and managed to keep the grades up so they couldn't complain too much.
That's amazing. So did your whole family travel together, or was it just you traveling with your dad?
Often it was just the kids. My mother didn't go as much. Occasionally she would go. But my dad's one of 10 children, nine surviving children. And he's used to, just he has the more the merrier concept. And the band members didn't always agree with that, but he did. And he was like, of course you can bring your friends and your siblings and everybody can pile on together. And we had a lot of fun. It was noisy, messy fun.
That's so funny. So how old were you at this time? Was this your whole childhood, like from the time you were a little baby?
It was from about 6 years old. That's when he had his first hit. Within a couple of weeks of releasing a particular song, he was on the American Bandstand with Dick Clark, and it was just kind of like a big life change. Before that, it was a humble rural life just outside of Nashville.
Wow. And how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I'm the oldest of five.
Oh, so you're the oldest. Wow. And
Mhm.
did you have musical ambitions or interest yourself?
I never did. And interestingly, I saw music as a vocation more than an art. Somehow I got the idea that this is something you do for a job, something you do for money, if you have that aptitude and skill. So I never felt that calling. I did feel led to write, and I feel like I have a natural aptitude for that. So words and writing was more my thing. My brothers who came along definitely had a very distinct musical talent and bent. So they're the ones who've gone on with that career.
Got it. Okay. And how did your family eat when you were growing up?
Oh, well, interestingly, so because of my dad's travel, he would bring back funny ideas like macrobiotics and seaweed. Well, we would find these strange things on the stove. We had found a pot of like the stringy black stuff, and it turned out it was some type of seaweed. And he would go through, fads and trends, and I found the book Fit for Life on the family bookshelf when I was young, and that book really impacted me. So he picked up that somewhere along the way. And there were a couple of vegetarian restaurants in Nashville that were really fun that he used to take us to. And I remember one was called The Laughing Man, and it was just a small little humble place, but they served ice bean, soft serve style. And ice bean is a soy-based ice cream that's made on the farm in Summertown. I didn't know that at the time.
Huh.
And I could get carob chips on top. So that was like my big treat. It was super delicious and fun. And that restaurant closed, and I always remembered that distinct taste of the ice bean and wondered like, where could I ever get something that tastes like that again? And then later in adulthood, I wound up giving birth on the farm in Summertown and discovering the heaven of ice bean. Like the whole food are full of ice bean, and found out that they had actually been supplying the Laughing Man with that product. So it was so fun to have that come back in my life.
Oh, that's amazing. So your dad was definitely interested in alternative health, it sounds like.
He was. And yes, and I thought that came from his experiences on the road and just being exposed to those ideas, especially in California. Because when we would go out there, we would eat at a lot of neat restaurants, including places like the Sunspot, and I don't remember all the names, but some long time good vegetarian restaurants out there. Um, but actually, he said that his first experience with eating that way came when he was hospitalized in my little hometown of Portland, Tennessee, which is a hotbed for Seventh-day Adventists. And the
Oh, I
hospital
did
was
not
run by
know
Seventh-day
that.
Adventists. Yeah, and they
Huh.
served him tofu in the hospital, and he liked it.
That's amazing.
So,
And that's unusual for a hospital. Hospitals are notorious for the junk food. I guess this
right.
was in previous decades, so maybe they didn't quite have the ties to fast food industries and all the
Mm.
contracts with those chain
Yes,
restaurants
right.
they do now.
Healthy food in a hospital is, yeah,
Yeah.
not
And
common.
how about your mom? Did you eat a lot at home, or was most of your, food experience like in restaurants and on these tours around the country?
Yeah, we didn't eat that much at home, I have to say. I think there was a lot of processed food at home. Occasionally, she had her specialties she would make, vegetable soup and some chilies and things like that. But really, our lifestyle was such that we ate out way too much. I mean, we really ate out a lot. And yeah, I eat way more at home these days. But back then, it was a lot of restaurant stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting. That's so different from my childhood. We never ate out. Eating out was such a treat. So when did you end up finding the vegan path? And what even prompted you to do some exploring?
Right. Well, when I was in my 20s, I started noticing that I was getting very bloated. I was getting a lot of skin issues. I had brain fog. I was feeling really, my joints were feeling achy and swollen. And I started going to see some naturopaths and reflexologists and people like that, just exploring like what was going on. And it was actually my beloved aunt, Sylvia, who found some information. She's funneled some great information to me a lot through my life about candida. And she said, I think this may be what's going on with you. So I looked into that and I decided to just go on one of like a gluten-free, dairy-free kind of fast because I'd never actually been completely vegetarian. People would suspect me of being vegetarian. I had vegetarian leanings, but I never was all the way for that period of time. And so I tried that. And for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I felt like I had the worst flu of my life. I had that die off, all the symptoms that go along with that. It was pretty miserable, but I was already miserable. So I just stuck it through. And then I came out of that into this beautiful new world. It's like, oh, the colors are brighter. I can think clearer. So I think that showed me like the impact that dietary changes can make. And it sort of like progressed from there. So, okay, if I can be dairy free for a long time, I focused after that on just getting organic food, but it wasn't all plant-based. And then later, I was exposed to people who were into raw food. So the raw food phase, and there were some really vibrant raw food potlucks that were happening in Nashville at the time. And it was those people that really got me into the vegan lifestyle because they were so happy and so vibrant and so just vital. I thought, wow, why not? But the food was so interesting too. It was like a new form of play for me. I was like, oh, I can make all these interesting things. And it just kind of, revitalized my interest in the kitchen and just preparing and making food. And it was almost like it wasn't a choice to go vegan. It was more like all my meals got replaced with all this delicious plant-based food, just happened that way. So I was sort of following pleasure, which is really what that group taught. They were like, we eat this way, not out of deprivation, but because it feels great.
That's so
So
interesting. And I love that because, there's so many stereotypes about Tennessee and Nashville and the way people eat. And that's incredible that you found this whole community. Where were they? And how did you encounter them?
they were meeting in people's homes around the Nashville area. And some of them were natives, and some of them, were from other places who just brought the ideas in. Um, it was kind of, in the zeitgeist at the time, this idea of raw food and how to eat raw and why you should eat raw and things like that. So
Yeah.
I had relatives in Chicago too. So I wound up going to some festivals and workshops up there led by people like David Avocado Wolf and some of the people who are famous in the raw food world.
Uh-huh.
And just being inspired by them. Karen's Raw Food Kitchen up there, Karen with a Y, she's an incredible woman, an example of vitality and longevity. And so I would go there and just gorge on all the delicious, beautiful food any chance I got. So that
And
helped reinforce it.
that's really interesting. So what was going on in your life at this point and what were you doing professionally?
Well, I was married, which I in my
That's a
first marriage.
professional endeavor. Yes.
Um, and he had health issues. He had a lot of health issues, dietary, like his digestive system was really messed up. He had a lot of pain, and he would tag along on those potlucks, and he just was feeling better and better. And I remember he ate, a typical lunch with his workmates one day and got so sick. He came home and said, I'm never eating meat again. Um, and he decided that, he was the first one in my household to do
Oh,
that.
interesting.
He
So
said, I
he
just
went
feel
vegan before you.
He did. And we had
How
a
old were you at
son.
this point, and how long had you been married?
We were in our 30s and we got married
Okay.
way too young and we're not married anymore. We got married
Did
at
you
19
meet
and
here in
20.
Tennessee or did you meet in college?
We met in college here in Tennessee.
Okay.
Yeah. But we had a son at that time, a toddler, and of course I was breastfeeding him. But as he got older and we were contemplating what to feed him, we were like, I remember my husband at the time saying, if we're not going to put it in our mouths and our bodies, why would we put it in his? So I remember we made that choice. What are we going to lift and offer to our child? What are we going to put on the plate in front of him? It just seemed like a very important decision at the time. And I'm so glad that we made that one because he had the healthiest childhood, the healthiest upbringing. I mean, he went on to breastfeed the full length of time, let's say, um, and just never had a single sick visit his entire childhood. And he's 20, almost 21 now, and has a
Wow.
sister, 15 as well.
Wow. And did you have a pretty supportive vegan community throughout all of this transition? Or did you feel kind of like, free agents out in the wilderness doing this vegan thing?
It was pretty much free agents at that time. I didn't know a lot of people eating that way, but I knew people who were respectful of it and who were making just conscious dietary choices of their own, even if they were different than mine. So I felt like we were in a community of people who understood the idea of just
Okay.
being deliberate about what you eat. Um, and that helped. And if people were definitely getting into organic and whole foods was becoming something that people, were interested in. So that helped. It helped my son as he got into the older ages, to have at least a few people around him who understood why and how we were eating that way. I will say that my Aunt Sylvia, again, she's been vegetarian and mostly vegan a lot of the time, for many decades. And for some reason, like she was my closest relative, for all my upbringing. I don't know why I didn't get the idea sooner, that
Mm,
that's something you could do. Somehow the other programming like outweighed that at the time. It just didn't occur to me that you could be healthy and not have animal products in your diet.
right.
But when I look back, there she was, a prime shining example for me. So
Yeah, it's so funny how these things can be right in front of us and we just don't see them or things just don't occur to us. Yeah, it really is kind of crazy. And so was this bond, this vegan connection, was that, did that reinforce your relationship with your husband or, how did that affect the relationship dynamic?
that was definitely a good part of it. Yeah, I respected his choice and his conviction, and because he worked in home building and in the management side, but still he was interacting with a lot of carpenters and people on job sites who just were totally giving him grief over it. So yeah, we're
And
not
this
close
was,
anymore, sadly.
yeah.
So I can't vouch for what he's eating now, but for a long time, like that did um, it was an enriching part of our relationship.
Oh, so you don't know if he's currently vegan?
No, no,
Oh,
sadly,
wow.
no. He's remarried someone who doesn't believe in being friends with your ex, sadly. So even though once we divorced, we were friends for 4 or 5 years after that, but sadly not anymore.
Wow. Wow. Things can change just so dramatically, so fast, and totally
Yeah,
unexpectedly.
yeah,
It's
right. Yeah,
really, really
absolutely.
something. And all of this, when you were doing this vegan lifestyle, was that largely pre-internet or had the internet come along by that point?
Very much pre-internet, I think. I think I was barely doing emails at that time. And I did
Yeah.
wind up having a second baby too, and just was preoccupied with
Hmm.
the low-tech Waldorf childhood approach. And so I wasn't
Yeah.
doing much online, but just
Yeah.
when I would travel, really go into those restaurants was super fun for the whole family because we could say like kids, you can have anything on the menu, like
Uh,
really
yeah.
anything. And we just had a
Yeah.
lot of fun with that. And I would bring back menus and cookbooks from those places. And that's really with the reinforcement. Also, you probably know this magazine.
Yes.
that I discovered this magazine, and that has been a huge source of support and inspiration through the years too. So I like to just like I give gifts or subscriptions for them and just talking about
That's
them, reading, laying
awesome.
around,
Yes.
propagandizing the world as much as I can.
Totally. No, I mean they do such a service. And in fact, they featured my novel, Marrying Myself, in 2023. So yeah, that was a big honor for me. I felt like I had arrived.
Yes, that's right.
So with your kids, raising them vegan, how was that for them? Did they even realize that they were doing something dramatically different from what their peers were eating?
Yeah. I will say this: when I was pregnant with my daughter Sophia, so when I was pregnant with Ryan, my son, I wasn't vegan during the pregnancy, and then
Hmm.
was when he was about a year old.
Okay.
But so he, you know, didn't know any different growing up. And then with Sophia, I was, pregnant, deciding, having to contemplate, like, can I have a vegan pregnancy? Can it be healthy? Am I missing some nutrients? What's going on? It seemed all very new and kind of unknown and maybe a little scary. So I did tons of research and talked to a lot of people. And I heard, a lot of people said, no, you can't. Um, but I just couldn't bring myself to eat any other way. And I just thought, I want to build this baby out of the best food possible. I was very conscious about that. Lots of whole, you know, foods, organic, a lot of raw, at least 50% raw at that time. And
50% raw. Wow.
I was 80 to 100% for several years too,
Wow.
before this pregnancy. And it was a wonderful way to eat and live. I mean, I felt really good for most of the time, almost too good. I felt like I was just levitating some of the time. But
Oh, that's
um,
amazing.
but anyway, I wound up, staying vegan for the pregnancy, and she was like a 9 pound 6 ounce home birth and the most beautiful, healthy. She's
Oh.
way taller than me now. She's been thriving the whole time, thankfully. I'm so grateful for that. And yeah, and the pregnancy was easy and had a lot of energy, and the birth was wonderful and quick. So, and I was 5 or 6 years older than when I had my son. So for me, it was a really good experience and interesting to juxtapose the two.
Yeah.
Um, and then as far as their diet, as they didn't know at all, and I just sort of took advantage of that when they were really little. It's like they don't even know McDonald's exists. Why am I going to tell them?
Right.
Or birthday cakes, don't have to be sugary and all of that. Why do we do that to kids? Like sort of like get them addicted, and pass on
Yeah.
the addictions to things like that. So I just kept it all like normal for them, was just very healthy. I would get raw birthday cakes and, lots of fruit kebabs and fruit popsicles and all these things, and just let them enjoy that for
Hmm.
a long time. Um, and they didn't really know any difference, until it was old, they were older.
Uh-huh.
And then at that time, they became more aware of people eating. I'm like, okay, it's more important to make sure that their psyche, is taken cared for, in my opinion. So, they would have a little sliver or a bite of a cake, or, or if once that when they were willing, I would bring a substitute or something like that for them. But I just didn't want to make too big of a deal about it. And I think because I was eating that way out of pleasure, they saw how happy I was about the food, and I didn't put any shame or blame around anything. It was just like, this is what we eat. This is our diet. This is how our family eats. And they just accepted that really beautifully.
And did you personally ever start delving into the ethical side of animal agriculture, or were you more focused just on food and health?
Yeah, I definitely started more on health. But then I became aware. Then I started watching documentaries and becoming aware of the animal side of it, which was very impactful. I shielded my children from some of that footage that's so disturbing and things like that until they were old enough to handle it. But I remember like thinking, okay, I think it's time now, when they were teenagers. Um, like, let's watch this together. Let's just be aware of this issue and things like that. And then now, of course, more people are talking about it in different sources. They might hear about it from friends or online or something like that. So
Mhm.
they're aware of those parts of it also.
How did they respond to that information?
compassionately, very like disturbed that that's how animals get treated. And so many animals in this country and around the world. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, we
And
have
what
this the
what was it
natural.
right? What was it like for you when you started learning about that aspect of our food system? Because you'd been eating this way for a long time, and just was that kind of a whole new world, a whole new level for you, or did it just kind of confirm what you'd already been doing?
Definitely was a reinforcement of like and a confirmation that this is the path I want to be on. I don't want to contribute to the suffering, the pollution, the waste of resources, and all that that entails along the way. It's interesting though because I like remember from childhood, like, oh yeah, I remember seeing like one of those CAFOs, I guess they call it, the long chicken um, buildings that have so many chickens crammed in. It's so sad. I remember like somehow seeing one of those when I was growing up in a rural part of Tennessee in childhood, and I remember thinking at the time, that's terrible. But I didn't connect it to what I might be eating, or what restaurants were serving. But it connected that later. I was like, oh yeah, that's what that was.
Right, right. And was your husband at the time, was he part of this whole process of exploring that aspect of things?
A little bit. I mean, that didn't matter to him as much, I guess, as he had the more dramatic health improvement, maybe,
Okay.
and that was more in his, forefront of his mind.
Yeah,
But he
yeah.
also, he also, did not want to mistreat animals, or participate in that system at all.
Right. I don't know how you can not feel good about not participating in that system. Even if you're purely health motivated, it's got to be a bonus that you're not participating in that sociopathic food system that we've got.
Yeah, I remember watching Earthlings. That was one of my favorite ones and the first really impactful one, and just
Yeah.
being gobsmacked, just stunned, at what we were learning. So I'm so
It's
thankful for the
still
formal.
amazing to me, yeah, that this is common practice with no, well, we're doing our best. Things could change really fast, but it's amazing that it's still so firmly entrenched. So throughout all of this, you were homeschooling your children, is that correct?
That's right.
And what prompted you to homeschool?
I think it was a progression of like those different lifestyle choices. I learned about attachment parenting, and that became a huge part of my life. I got certified as an attachment parenting educator and
Yeah, what
volunteer as a
what is attachment
counselor.
parenting?
I think my mentor described it as the parenting you would do if nobody was telling you how to parent. It's like your natural instinctual bonding behaviors with your child, and they remind us that we are primates ourselves, and the way primates interact
Wait,
with each
we're
other.
primates? We're animals? What are you talking about? We're human beings.
Right. Yeah, on the spectrum of primate. But I started noticing the way we parent children to me is very disconnecting. It we don't meet infant needs of children as fully as I feel like they need to be so that we grow up with such unmet needs. That's really hard in adulthood to heal that. And I just wanted to start out like give them the best start possible physically with the food and then also emotionally, which also affects your biology, by letting them have a really, safe, secure, bonded childhood and with their primary attachment giver, which I was honored to be.
Do you
Yeah,
feel
lots of
like
high
you
touch.
received, the sort of parenting that met your needs? Or like, how did you even stumble onto attachment parenting, the whole concept?
Right. Well, I was raised by little kids. I mean, they were literally little kids. They got married super young, super quick, and I half the time felt like I was raising them. It's that situation. Because they actually weren't doing a lot of research or putting a lot of thought into how they were parenting, they did a lot of things instinctually right, which I appreciate. And I just decided, the things that there were definitely unmet needs and some things that were difficult about my upbringing, but I just learned that I could pick and choose. So I just focused on bringing what was good about it letting the rest go, and then following my own guidance. I'm a journalist, have a journalism background, and so I just research everything, enjoy that process of learning and sifting. And so I'm like, of all the philosophies of parenting, which one is speaking to me? And I just went through them all. And
Mm.
when I would read books that talked about, how to control, manipulate your child through the fear of punishment, or, putting them in their own separate space all through the night when they're infants and things like that. And it just, to me, that was as traumatic as learning about how animals, factory farmed animals spend their lives. I'm thinking like it weighed on me to think that infants around the world are being born under these conditions where they're being, the mothers are being medicated and the babies are being forced out, and it's scary. There's no care for who they are as human organisms. And then they're like crying all night in their beds alone. And parents are being told, like, don't respond to your baby. They need to learn to sleep through the night. They need to learn to self-soothe. And that just was horrifying to me. I mean, it still is to think that. But I just thought, well, you know, the kids I can take care of, I'll do it this way that feels good to my heart. And then I really love being a part of the organization that helps support families who were trying to learn a new way. Like we were all reprogramming ourselves, like how to, raise children without passing on some of the dysfunctions that we were raised with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
hard because just like with the plant-based diet, you need community support for that. You need to have at least 5 other families that don't think you're crazy for not spanking your child or something like that, and then
Right.
you can have solidarity and get through it together.
Right. And a lot of these parents, even with the best intentions, they're often going against their own instincts, just following what they think is expert guidance. For instance, my mother
Right.
told me that when I was born, at that point in time, breastfeeding was considered passé. Nobody did
Mhm.
that. That was kind of a hippie thing. And I think I was breastfed for maybe a day. And that was it. And when I was born, I was very small. I was like 5 pounds, and I was healthy. But the doctors told my mother that I had to stay in an incubator, and she couldn't pick me up,
Mm.
and she said it was so painful for her because she saw me just lying there, and she wanted to pick me up and hold me and cuddle me, and she just
Mm. Mm.
didn't do it because she was following doctor's orders. So
Right.
yeah, I think that's just adds to the tragedy of it all is a lot of these parents, they're acting out of love, but just doing these parenting techniques that are against their own intuition. So that's great that you're reversing the trend. So did any
Well,
of
yeah.
your family members, were any of them intrigued by this whole vegan lifestyle of yours? Or did they just kind of think you were just like the wild child and let you do your thing?
Well, it's funny because my dad still says to people, he's like, I said, I influenced her, but I didn't, I didn't know I was creating such a monster or something. He'll like make a joke, like, I didn't know she's going to take it to this extreme or something. So, because
So he
he's
never
still,
went, he never went vegan or vegetarian or
for
anything. I mean, I
periods
guess
of
it's not
time,
over. He's still with us. So you never know.
yeah, for periods of time, he does still, but he's just, he tries things out, he just moves around with things. But he overall eats way healthier than the standard American parent at his age, that's for sure. And sometimes for long stretches he's completely plant-based. So
Mm-hmm.
just not as consistently as me, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what about your kids? How old are they now?
My son is 20 and my daughter's 15.
And are they committed vegans, or, where are they on
My
the
son
spectrum?
decided he's going to be vegetarian. He said,
Okay.
okay, he's not going to eat meat. He's like, that's just gross and too far. He said, but he is eating eggs, um, and a little dairy at times. And he sources his eggs, responsibly or conscientiously, I should say. I have a funny little anecdote about that. His first apartment when he moved in with some buddies, like it was like day 2 or something, and I wonder what's going on over there. What are they doing? What are they talking about? He called me up and said, "Mom, do you know local farmers who we can get some good eggs from?" Of course, I don't eat eggs myself. And I was like, well, I'll help you with that though. I was like, because, that was a pretty good thing to imagine them over there, these young teenage boys contemplating how to get healthy eggs. So that's pretty good.
I mean, yeah, I see where you're coming from. I personally don't think there's anything whatsoever healthy about eggs, but yeah, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, as
It's
long as you put
unusual.
some
It's an
thought into
unusual
it.
topic of conversation for teenage boys or 20-year-old
Yeah.
boys. Yeah,
Well, I
that's for
think
sure.
back to where I was at that age and what I was eating and
Yeah,
thinking, they're
yeah, good
way
point.
ahead.
Good
And
point.
you just don't
Right,
know like
right.
where they're going. And I always told him growing up, I was like, I am propagandizing you, I'm brainwashing you, and I know it, and you need to know it. Like I'm raising you the way I have come to believe is correct as for us and for me. But you'll make your own decisions when you're older. And I think if he didn't experiment with another way of eating, then it really wouldn't be his to own. And
Hmm. That makes sense.
I think everyone should make their choices in freedom.
Right, right. I know it gives like there's truth in both perspectives. On the one hand, we can't force anything upon anybody. And at the same time, I'm not a parent myself, so I'm just speaking hypothetically. But, my my own view, of course, is that a parent does seek to instill values in, her child. So that's part of the responsibility of being a parent. You don't just say, yeah, just do whatever feels right to a 2-year-old. You do
Right.
instill
Mhm.
values and try to cultivate kindness and compassion and love. So but yeah, I totally agree that at the end of the day, um people have to be able to do their own thing and make their own choices and own those.
Yeah.
So what was it like homeschooling all of those years, and how was it for you building that community?
Yeah. And I'm still homeschooling my daughter who's 15 and my bonus daughter who's 13. 'Cause I'm remarried, is also homeschooling. So I absolutely have loved it. Homeschooling did allow me to micromanage their influences and their diet. I did think about like if I was turning them loose in schools, with a packed lunch, who knows what they're actually going to eat in the day. So I recognized that that was an advantage and a privilege there. But
Mhm.
I also just loved being a co-learner with them. Like I really didn't position myself as their dominant teacher. I had some good advice in the beginning. A woman told me, it's like, don't try to be a school at home, be a family that learns together. And I think that was excellent advice because I've seen parents who try to be school at home burn out so quickly and they get very adversarial with their kids and
Mm.
there's all this tension. But if you can just relax into the natural learning process and be excited about learning yourself, then it's really joy. It's really fun. And I'm just wouldn't trade those days for anything. I love it so much.
That's really cool. I remember reading the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. I don't know if you've ever read
Mhm.
that book, but one of the points, it's all about cultivating what she calls a growth mindset, which is like a love of learning and a love of the process. And one of the points they make in that book, which really stuck with me, was that the best teachers aren't the people who really love to teach, they're the people who love to learn. And, when I read that,
Mhm.
I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah, because like you said, it's not an authoritarian thing. It's like instilling this love of education and learning and discovery. So
Mhm.
it sounds like you're really doing that with your kids. Do you feel like they've enjoyed the process? Like, what's it been like for them doing something different from the way a lot of their other kids are getting their education?
Yeah, I think it's been great for them. I think having a peer group is crucial for their long-term satisfaction. Um, Yeah, I don't think it has to be too many, but a few kids that they feel connected to and that they can go through time with, is very supportive. There's
Yeah.
a lot of opportunities for homeschoolers in this area where we live, but you could do something different with a different set of people every day and never actually connect and form bonds and relationships. So when my son was a kindergartner, I started a group for that purpose. Really, that was our primary goal, is just to create healthy, supportive friendships for the kids and the adults, because it's just as important
Mm.
for us
Yeah.
to enjoy
Yeah.
the process. And that really helped. And I think they loved having their freedom. They loved being able to pursue, what they enjoyed in addition to the basics. And I loved like getting to introduce them and expose them to like things that are not as common anymore. I think back about what my son did. He knitted, he crocheted. I mean, he knitted so many dozens of hats that with this senior citizen group of ladies, and donated them to this charity where they would go and pass them out in Appalachia. And I mean, that was so neat. I mean, and to him as a middle schooler at that time, it didn't seem weird or odd at all. It was just like, oh yeah, you want hats? I'm going to make you some hats, and he's just going to make a bunch of hats.
That's
So it was really
adorable.
fun.
Yeah.
And then later, like he and my daughter, they did 5 years of like woodworking lessons. My son did blacksmithing for a while.
Wow.
My daughter's been able to go deep into her love of ballet with a really wholesome, really nurturing ballet studio that's near our home. This is her 8th year, and she just went on point, and she's dancing lead in this show this summer. And
Wow. Oh,
yeah, it's
that's
so fun.
cool.
Like, and they didn't have the stress and pressure I think that a lot of kids in the school system now really have.
Mm.
They also got to follow their own biorhythms, eat and sleep when their body was told them to eat, sleep, without
Mhm.
having artificial schedules and diets imposed upon them. So
Yeah.
I've seen them thrive with it. It's been really great. I'm just
Wow.
thankful that I got to do it and that we have the option, in our state. Some states make it difficult and some countries don't even allow it. So I recognize that it's a privilege.
Wow. Wow. And do your kids have any vegan friends? Like, do you know other vegan families?
Yeah, they have had some throughout the years. Like this group has attracted people who really care about their diet, and a few of them have been vegan. It was really nice because from the start, we would have potluck meals together, or we'd have snack luck tables, or something we would call it. And everybody just naturally suggested, not even like it wasn't something I imposed, but let's make it mostly or all plant-based so that any kid can come get anything they want off the table at any time. And if you want or believe you need to have something else in your food, just label it and put it in a different place, or just have it for your own family separately. So most people were just very happy to have these plant-based food culture at our meetups, which was so nice.
Nice.
But
Nice.
some families were actually vegan themselves too through the years. So
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
people who could cook really delicious things and put on our table. We've had the best meals at these homeschool gatherings.
So do you still do tons of cooking and make like all these exotic raw dishes?
Not as much raw all the time. Raw dessert is still the best, I think. That's easy and delicious. It's amazing how good dates and chocolate or dates and raw cacao can taste together. And
Yeah,
fruit-based things, of
what are some of
course.
your favorite raw desserts that you've made?
One of the like perennial favorites is this just chocolate avocado pudding. In fact, that was something I made when my kids were little, as that they could have it for breakfast, they could have it for lunch, they could have it for any meal they wanted, because it was just a bunch of avocados and dates with a little maple syrup and cacao powder, and
Wow.
super easy. I put hemp seeds in there sometimes or something like that too to get some more omega fatty acids in there. And that's easy, it's easy. So
Yeah.
that's a common one.
So so you've been vegan quite a while now. So what was the year that you first went vegan?
It was 20 years ago,
20
19
years
or
ago.
20 years ago.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. And
Mhm.
how have things evolved since then? Like how have you personally evolved and how has your eating, evolved over those decades?
In the beginning, it was heavy raw. I really, was eating the raw food just out of fun. And it was just, I was playing with food and just enjoying that and going to raw restaurants in other towns. And did it for several years. And when my son first, we tried out a Waldorf preschool for him. I felt like even before then that I wanted to homeschool, but I thought I should try out this Waldorf school while part-time is an option and just make sure I'm making the right choice. Like if that's a
Mhm.
wonderful thing for us, then we'll do it. But and he did have a good experience there. We learned some really neat things and met some great people, but it's pretty far from our house. And when he aged out of the part-time, it just felt like our balance shifted. We became school centered and not family centered anymore.
Mm.
So after just a short time of that, I was like, let's pull him back under my wing and let's just,
Mm.
you know, become family centered again.
Right,
But
right.
while
That's
he
a good
was,
point because school is kind of the way it's done. It's kind of like a full-time job for kids.
Mhm. It
Yeah.
is, it seems like bondage to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but when he was there, you know, these wonderful Waldorf teachers, of which one of my dear friends, you know, is a fantastic one, you know, and she understands raw too and lived in Hawaii for a time. And she definitely understands and is, you know, a plant-based eater herself. So her classroom was great, but there were, you know, some teachers who like were serving this exotic, weird thing called oatmeal. My son was like, he took one bite and like spit it out. He had never had cooked grains. It was so funny. He was 4 years old and he was like, "Ugh," choking on this oatmeal. Um, hilarious. And so that teacher at the time, I told her, I was like, you know, sort of explaining, you know, gently, I was like, you know what I would love to do? I could come in because he was there 3 half days a week. I could come in one of the days with my hand cranked blender because everything is like manual, you know, in a Waldorf preschool, especially like, you know, it's going to be hand cranked. So the kids will get all this, you know, this practice and dexterity and all this. And I will bring the fruit and we can make these smoothies or fruit puddings, you know, once a week I'll do that. And so she was so kind and let me do that for like a year. So he would have something raw to eat at least one of the days a week. But I also learned like it's probably good for him to understand like the benefits and you know and pleasure of a baked sweet potato. I started thinking, okay, we can incorporate some good healthy cooked foods in our diet too.
Wow. So they weren't just being raised vegan, they were being raised largely raw. Wow.
Yes.
Wow. That's a hilarious story about the oatmeal. At first I thought you were saying that it was a kid who was used to like standard American diet who couldn't handle the oatmeal because it was too pure and wholesome and unrefined, but it was just the opposite. Your
Yeah.
son thought cooked oats or,
Mhm.
processed and gross. That's so funny.
It's hilarious. Yeah, he was used to like sprouted oat groats or something, you know, like that.
Right, right, right. It is funny how even like once I started, getting new awareness around food, it is funny how much you learn, how much processing, happens in levels. Like there are different levels of processing of oats. For instance, there's
Mhm.
the quick oats are more processed, and then there are the slow cooking oats, and then there's steel cut oats, and then there are what's below that. Is it oat groats or I
Mhm.
don't even know, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's amazing how much processing happens even to the foods that we consider whole foods.
so
Um,
true.
so you your marriage to the vegan man ended at well, we don't know if he's still vegan. So you were back in the dating world as a long time vegan and conscious eater. What was that like for you, navigating that realm as somebody who eats so differently from how the rest of the world eats?
Mhm. Well, I didn't actually date that much. I was just busy with friends and my kids, and I didn't really get out there intentionally. A couple of people that I did have dates with, I think one of them was already plant-based, and then strangely, I reconnected with a high school boyfriend who had already been vegetarian for a long time, and then he went vegan during our reconnection time. But he lives in another state, and we didn't actually date all that much, but we just would share information. I subscribed
That's
to
a
Veg News for
sweet
him.
story. Wow. Wow.
It was really great. And then he has a twin brother. So over time, he reported back to me that his brother went vegan too. So they're up in
Ah,
Philadelphia, but was lucky to have a lot of good restaurants up there
yeah,
and
there's some
support for
amazing vegan restaurants in Philadelphia. Wow. Wow. So what ended up happening? You remarried, and
I
was
did.
your husband, vegan or vegan conscious, or was that something new to him when you met him?
It was pretty new to him. He had started watching some documentaries, and he's definitely always been a big animal lover. And so those two things for him, like the health benefits and the animal welfare issues, definitely meant something to him. He started making small incremental changes. I never ask him like overtly, like, please do this for me, or I won't be with you if you're not. But it just, again, sort of like my decision about children, I just feel like everybody needs to make decisions out of freedom and out of their own guidance to be authentic for them. And I just want to respect where people are. So I was definitely, it wasn't a deal breaker, but I don't think he ever ordered meat in front of me at all. And he just naturally, the more time he spent with me, started eating it less and less. And then I think he's high plant-based now. Um, he still likes cheese, dairy cheese, but we don't have it in the house and he doesn't eat it, with me that often. So I just love that he was willing to learn, he was willing to follow his body's guidance and wisdom about that and just make better and better choices. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I respect and appreciate that along the way. I think
Yeah.
it would have been hard if he was saying, no, I'm a steak and potatoes man, and that's how I'm going to be. I don't think we could have been
Mhm.
together
And
long
was this
term.
an issue that you had to give some real thought to, or did you just kind of proceed intuitively? Did you have, discussions about it? Did you have to identify for yourself whether it was going to be a deal maker? What was your process internally?
Yeah, I think it was mostly intuitive. I think him spending time with me and seeing how much I enjoyed eating this way and how, it was working really well for me, just physically and health wise and all of that. I think it was just, he was like, you know, that's great, So it was sort of more of an attractive energy rather than something
Perfect.
that we
Yeah.
had to, yeah, really wrestle with. But only later did it occur to me like, ooh, if that hadn't been the case, I don't think I couldn't be with someone who insisted on having that in the house or sat down at restaurants and ate that way. I'm just grateful that it didn't have to become an issue. But I do have
Right.
friends who said, like they would only date someone who had this strict diet already. And I just feel like there's room for people to grow. And I'm willing, like, there's a full spectrum of things that are important to a relationship. And if you have some of the key issues here, maybe this other issue can be one that you grow together in.
Right, right. And for me, the way, because it is tough as a vegan, figuring out how to navigate that world. The sad reality, of course, is that there are very few vegan men out there. There are pre-existing vegan men. There are very few. So if you limit yourself to dating only already strictly vegan men, you're going to have a tough time meeting people. And then, in my experience, just because someone's vegan does not mean that I will hit it off with that person, male or
Right.
female
Mhm.
it's funny because on some levels you would think that, oh, we share this common view of the world and this common, foundation of compassion, but it's not sufficient. And I remember my brother is vegan, and I remember talking to him about this challenge years ago when I was, trying to date in New York City, and I
Mhm.
was just bemoaning just the challenge of how am I gonna find a vegan man and what are the odds of that? And he said, well,
Mhm.
I don't think the odds are that small, because really what you're looking for is someone who's curious, who's smart, who's compassionate, who's open, who's genuinely interested in living well and, living a good life.
Mhm.
And someone like that is gonna, that's what being vegan is all about. And so,
Mhm.
those qualities, that's what you're going to be looking for in a partner regardless. And the veganism is kind of just a byproduct of those qualities. And when he framed it that way, that made more sense. I can't say that it's, it's, you know, still been easy, but I
Mhm.
think, yeah, your approach sounds well, obviously it worked out well for both of you. And, of course, if you had approached it more militantly and with a judgmental attitude, that would not have gone over well, quite likely. And the good news is that now you both benefit from it because he, of course, benefits from just, I'm sure his conscience feels better not to be mistreating animals by his food choices, and of course his health, apart from the dairy cheese, which I'm sure will ultimately fall by the wayside. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. It sounds like you just kind of intuitively grasped what I sometimes have to think myself into, just saying,
Mhm.
well, I
Mhm.
wouldn't want anyone telling me what to eat. And so therefore I'm not
Mhm.
going to tell anyone else what to eat. But yeah, you seem just like a very open and non-judgmental person, which is great. And when you have the knack of just making food seem fun and delicious and, interesting, then game over. What else is there left to talk about? So after all this time, all these years of being vegan, how do you think the vegan movement is doing? What's your take?
I think more and more people are open to it. And I think there are a lot of people who are very flexitarian now who are, I mean, just like my husband, even though he'll eat some dairy cheese, he eats a mostly plant-based cheese, and a lot of people are out there who might still occasionally have an animal, but for, meal, but they're eating a lot of plant-based products, besides that too. So to me, I think that's all great progress. I see more people who even just understand the word vegan. Will go to like, I'm just sometimes blown away when I go to like a little restaurant in a little town out on the outskirts or something, and they'll have something on there like denoting a vegan option. Like, "Ooh, well, the word vegan is actually on this menu." I'm
I know
seeing
I
that more
love
and
when I see the
more.
word. Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so it seems to me like an exciting time, and I told my kids that too. I was like, "You're being raised in the vegan glory days. You're not deprived of anything. I mean, any sweet dessert, any meal, anything. They've got the best of all. They don't have to sacrifice flavor or anything." And I liked the weird flavors of my childhood, the
Mm,
strange foods that we had,
mm,
but I
mm.
think that's an acquired taste, and some of it, the old tofutti and some of the things that were
Yeah.
not the best, but were kind of exotic and delicious because
Right.
of that, how weird they were. They
That's
just haven't
funny.
had to do any of that, So,
Right.
and
Right.
then the media, the magazines that are available, and all these amazing documentaries that every time I watch one, I'm like so thankful for that as a medium because it's delivering so much information in an accessible format for a wide variety of people who are coming across this. And I meet more people who've converted to veganism from forks over knives than anything else. Like whenever I meet people who converted, like just decided they're going to switch their diet, like, more instantly, 80% of the time it's because of that material, forks over knives, which I just find interesting. I just will sort of just casually taking a little informal poll, and that one comes up a lot. Of course, there's so many good
Interesting.
ones.
Yeah, yeah, that was a big one for me. And I remember I watched that with a vegan and vegetarian meetup group in New York City. And I knew nothing about the movie before going to it. I didn't know it was health focused. And so I was geared up for I was geared up for like another Earthlings, a hardcore animal rights movie. So I was a little bit disappointed because I was like, oh, this film is so just calm and interesting but just rational and reading like I just wasn't prepared for that, but it really stuck with me for sure. And even here in Tennessee there have been a lot of changes, like a lot of new restaurants. And how's your vegan community developed in this time?
Yeah, I think it's sort of like attachment parenting for me. Like I was in that group, it was just living and breathing it for so many years. And then suddenly you got that moment where it became not the norm, sadly, yet, but just more of the norm for people to at least be aware of some of these things so that you don't necessarily need a group as much as you did in the past. You've just got natural support, in
Mm,
your daily life. I feel that's sort of the way with the plant-based food. It's I don't feel like I need an exclusive group as much anymore. I do appreciate that they're out there, maybe for people who are at different stages of the journey and need that earlier support. I'm so glad that they're there. But yeah, I just feel like people are very accepting and people are very, I think sometimes, it's hard to argue when somebody's healthy, happy, and, kind about it, maybe. And so I just feel I never encounter a situation where anybody's giving me much grief about it. And even years ago, this is kind of a funny story about a relative, but you've heard of the restaurant called Cracker Barrel?
Yes.
Okay, so I was at a Cracker Barrel with a bunch of family members who didn't know anything about my dietary choices. And I was trying to like discreetly explain to the waiter, like, is there meat in the beans? What do you put and everything? And I said, I'm eating just vegetarian, plant-based, it was vegan, but saying a word that I thought maybe they would understand more. And something came out, and of course there was meat in it. And I had to say in front of all these aunts and uncles, I was like, I'm so sorry, but this is not going to work for me. And an uncle said, "Oh, did they put meat in your food? Here, you can have half my chicken sandwich." It's like he didn't understand that chicken was also, meat or an animal, but he was so kind. He was like really trying to help me. So the impulse of kindness, like, it's really sweet. And I remember that really fondly. Um, and it's like, that's also, an animal. It's just funny that, you know, but
Yep.
overall,
Yep.
like I run into Cracker Barrel several times. Like I will just write in and pester these people and say, what is on your menu that I can eat? And for years, there was nothing but like banana slices. I think they wrote back and said you could have like plain oatmeal, you could have banana slices, it's just stuff like that. And I haven't been there in a long time, but I've heard that they actually have a few more things on their menu now. So this is
Yeah, I have never
progress.
been inside. I've heard of Cracker Barrel and obviously passed them on the highway, but I've never been inside one. Yeah, that's
I think we have more options there now. If we wanted to try it,
what's that?
I think there are more options there now if we wanted to try it out. Like I heard that they put a
Yeah, I
little
think
more
I've
effort
heard
into
that
their
as
menu.
well. Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, that's so interesting. Thanks so much for sharing, your wealth of experience. You've been vegan so much longer than a lot of us, a lot of us fairly recent vegans. You've lived kind of a whole lifetime as a vegan. Have you been vegan longer than you've not been vegan?
Not yet. I'm in my
Not yet.
early
Okay.
50s, and I'm so thankful that I did find that path when I did because I feel like I'm aging. I know I'm aging way better, more comfortable in my body than I would have eating the old. So I'm just so grateful for that.
Same here. Same here. Yeah, I feel the same way. I haven't been vegan as long as you, but I'm so grateful that I found the path. If only I'd found it earlier, it could have saved me a lot of time and a lot of heartache and struggle. But, I'm just grateful to have found it when I did for sure. All right. Well, Kara, final question. Is there a single word for you that sums up what being vegan is all about?
I think it's maybe vitality. Yeah. Because that's for me, that's for the animals, that's for the planet. It's life
Perfect.
force.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, and I don't think that's one that's come up yet on the show. I'm always impressed. People keep coming up with new words, which is great, but vitality that's a good one. Yeah. All right. Well, again, thank you so much. It's such a privilege to have you on the show. I love featuring all these local Tennessee vegans because I've gotten the chance to talk with vegans from all over the world. But it's amazing to me that there are these long-standing, committed, just really smart, interesting vegans right in this Nashville area. I love it. I love it. So thank you for
Thank
being
you.
one of them and for coming on the show. Best of luck to you and your family and all your new endeavors. I know you're always pushing limits and you just accepted a new job. And so I'm just, again, so impressed that you keep growing and learning and just staying in touch with that vitality that you mentioned and that you truly embody
Thank you,
based on
Chrissy.
your
Thank you so
example. So,
much. I
of
appreciate your
course.
work and spreading the word and giving voice and adding to that media out there that's helping change things. Thank you for that.
Well, it's my honor and my privilege. So we close every episode of the Vegan Posse by taking 30 seconds of silence for all of the suffering animals, human and non-human, who desire, as we all do, safety, happiness, and the freedom to live out their lives without interference. So, Kara, I invite you to join me in 30 seconds of silence for the animals, and we'll conclude with the sound of the bell. Thank you, Kara, and thank you, Posse. See you next time. Until then, stay strong and stay true.
Thank you.